Hello, everyone. This is Mahadeva the Thunder Wizard. And today I am going to be adjusting my necklaces. And then I'm going to be reading from my book. Which one is it? Awakening Sleipnir. So, what I'm going to be doing is, of course, reading from the book, which, by the way, you can get by going to courses.thunderwizard.com and clicking on books. And I will stop when motivated to give editorial opinions. If my thoughts have changed, I'll share that. If there's other things about it that I want to share, I'll share that. And then, probably won't get through all of it in one video. Might take, 2 or 3 times before we get to the whole thing. But I'm happy to then take any questions if there are any. We'll see if anybody shows up for this. But anyway, in any case, I'll get it out there. So, let us go ahead and get started, shall we? So, this is the book. Where the heck did it go? This is the book Awakening Sleipnir, Reviving Tribal Germanic Shamanism by me, Michael William Denney. So, then it goes through the table of contents. So, then comes the section, My Story. Section 1. So apparently I have multiple sections here. It's been a long time since I read this. It's a long time since I wrote it, so this will be kind of new for all of us. So, Section 1, My Story. Introduction. For over 20 years, I have been studying, practicing, and teaching various traditional life force, animist, quote, shamanic, unquote, disciplines from different parts of the globe. Oh, sorry, did I say the word globe? Sorry, I meant from different parts of the plate, surrounded by ice for some reason, and for some reason things go down without gravity. So, animist shamanic disciplines from different parts of the flat earth. In regard to most of these disciplines, it was never my conscious intent to seek out these teachings. If anybody were to tell me that I would eventually teach these various animist practices and eventually create my own path of Teutonic animism, I probably would have said, nah, I doubt it. I have nothing against any of that stuff, but that's really not my thing. Over the years, after I graduated college, I would repeatedly find myself being unwittingly drawn into various esoteric traditional life force animist practices, seemingly against my will and better judgment. As a child, I had a very passionate belief in my Protestant Christian upbringing. It was not uncommon for me to have powerful dreams and visions during my childhood years. Since most of these visions could be interpreted in a broad Christianized worldview, they were tolerated by my parents and church when I was young. I suppose as long as my experiences could be vaguely interpreted in a Christian context, they were considered cute. All young kids are natural-born shamans, but this sensitivity to spirit is frowned upon when they grow up. While some people are seemingly more able to shrug off their animist perceptions of reality as they grow older, this proved more difficult for me and resulted in feelings of being abnormal. I did not understand why most other people could not see and experience the world as I did. This was actually a source of deep pain for many years of my life. So as a kid, I took solace by diving deeply into the spiritual mythology presented to me at that time, which was Protestant Christianity. Becoming an apostate. After high school, I enrolled in a fundamentalist Christian Bible college with the intent of becoming an evangelist and minister. Without going into too much detail, I ended up abandoning my Christian beliefs 4 years later. In short, the idea that an all-powerful, all-knowing God who would go to all the immense trouble of creating these complex beings known as humans in his own image just to then throw them into everlasting torment simply because they did not subscribe to the correct belief system was just too arbitrary and cruel for me to accept any longer. That was a long sentence. I did not abandon my religion because I stopped believing in it. I still believed in it. I just could no longer worship a deity that I did not respect. I fully believed that I would also go to the Christian hell for rejecting their version of Jesus. Based on my experience, my non-Christian friends were more authentic and supportive than most of the Christians I had known over the years. I had agnostic and atheist friends who would willingly jump in front of a bus to protect me. Yet most of the people in my neighborhood Baptist church, that was the name of it, by the way, Neighborhood Baptist Church, had no problems ruthlessly judging others and maliciously gossiping behind others' backs. And simply because they had accepted Jesus into their hearts, they were absolved of all sins and would spend eternity in bliss. For my generous, faithful, and supportive atheist friends to burn in torment for being spiritually mistaken, while those hypocritical Christians lived in heaven for joining the correct religious club, was just too cruel for me to accept any longer. While I too wanted that supposed eternal bliss for myself, my principles just would not allow me to worship that kind of hypocritical deity. So believing that I too would spend an eternity in hell, I abandoned my Christian faith, taking solace in the thought that at least while I was alive, I could respect myself. If I were to spend eternity in torment, at least I knew that I would be surrounded by others like me. It was easily the most painful and frightening time of my life. But of course, after a few years away from the cult-like atmosphere of fundamentalist Christianity, I was able to slowly accept different ideas of spirituality and begin the long healing journey to erase the scars of spiritual absolutism. Yeah, so looking back on this, I'm not reading now, it's me commenting. Looking back on it, that really was tough. It was very stressful. And I really didn't leave. It's amazing to me now, I look back on it, but now I know why so many people stay. Because I don't think a lot of people can do this. But looking back on it, I spent the last probably year or two in Bible college where, I had originally gone because I was going to become an evangelist. I was going to be like the next Jimmy Swaggart. That was my plan. And, it's one thing to go to church and to get all fired up and, Jesus saved me and people are sinners. And it's one thing to do that. And it's another thing to actually go and start really reading and studying, really studying the Bible, really studying a thing called textual criticism. If you're familiar with it, textual criticism is where Christians, usually in seminary, will look at different papyri, the most original writings of the New Testament especially, and they'll look through the different ones to find the one which they believe to be the most ancient, the most authentic. That's what they're looking for. That's called textual criticism. When you start to do that, even as a Christian, you start to find out that it doesn't line up. I mean, forget about all the other historical and other things that don't line up. The texts themselves don't line up, and you start to really, realize that some people actually just sat and wrote this down. It wasn't like there was, a 3D projector and God showed up and said, "Bah," and then you went, and then there was just one. It was obviously, and then the whole idea of the inerrancy of God's word starts to really crumble when you really look at it. And all the things that didn't make sense about, what is this hell thing, and why are people being thrown into hell? Basically, simply because they're not part of the right club. It doesn't make any sense. Of course, all the other things, supposedly the children of Israel, as they're coming out of Egypt, just decided, according to the Old Testament, just decided, that God told them, hey, those indigenous people over there have been living there for ever, but I want you to have it, so why don't you just go in and wipe them out? Women, children, animals, everything. Go. I just couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't look myself in the face. And I couldn't look my friends who weren't Christian in the face, who had better morals than my Christian friends. So out of my own morals, I left, fully believing that it was true and that I would be punished forever, and that just the ruler of the universe was unjust and, a nutbag. And after years of that, being out of that, you start to realize that it was a cult. But it was really stressful for me. I remember being really stressed out and feeling just all kinds of horrible things, but I just couldn't. I could no longer live with myself and be in that religion. And looking back on it, I think that's why a lot of people stay. A lot of people stay because they can't stand it either, but they're just too afraid to walk away. So looking back on it, I have to say I had a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts to walk into eternal damnation simply because of your morals. All right, next chapter. Taoist animism. In 1991, I had been out of Christianity for 4.5 years. I was 27 years old and I was shopping for a practical, effective internal martial art. I stumbled upon and was given the rare opportunity to join an invitation-only, esoteric, family lineage, mystical Taoist martial art class that was simply referred to as the Tao by my first instructor. I was later told that this art was an inner door internal martial art practice of mystical warriors from the fabled Mao Shan Taoist lineage of wizards and demon fighters. Let me stop there for a second. What had happened was, this will help those of you who are following what I teach about following your soul desire. And so let me state that again if you're not familiar with what that is. It is my belief, based on my experience, that we come into this life given a desire that is implanted in our soul. It is the main reason you are here, and it is not optional. If you do not follow that desire, you will suffer. It is a commandment. It is as close to a commandment from God as exists, but it comes from your soul. If you do not follow it, your body will rebel against you, life will rebel against you, and you will suffer all kinds of miseries. That is why the first thing I do when I talk with people is I go there first, because whatever they're complaining about probably can be solved if they can become honest about what their soul desire is and go after it. And then when you go after it, you will have to deal with karmic and internal and even external resistance, but you will be healthy and happy. So this was definitely something that my soul came here to learn, this art. And what happened is that I was very angry based on all kinds of stuff, not just being just a young guy full of testosterone, but I was also, I had basically had PTSD from childhood garbage. And I was a very angry guy. And while I was no longer doing drugs or alcohol, things like that, I was still full of rage. So much so that I'd walk down the street and everybody would just part. They would just get out of my way. I mean, I'd be in stores. I'd walk around, Target or whatever, and I would be followed by security guards. Wherever I went, people were just afraid I was going to do something. And I was very angry. And I knew that there had been a couple of times when I was when I was a little kid, like I was the shortest kid in school and I was always getting picked on, and I would black out and I'd beat kids up, twice my size. I'd beat the hell out of them. And then I'd come to and there'd be like, my fists would be all red and there'd be like a bloody faced kid. And so I knew I had a lot of rage in me, and I was afraid. And what had happened in my adulthood is that there were instances where fights were about to happen. Like I was in some nasty neighborhoods, and tough guy gang members tried to steal from me and things like that. And I'd start to go into that that place where I was about to black out. And I'd look on their faces. The look on their faces was, these were hardened, like just out of prison, nasty, tough guys. And the look on their face was of pure fear. And that scared me more than anything. Whatever they saw in me scared them so bad that they would literally drop their head and turn around like dogs with their tails between their legs. That scared the crap out of me, because I knew if I lost my temper, I'd probably kill somebody if I got away with it. If they didn't kill me first, I'd probably kill them. And so I was looking for a martial art, not because I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to have skills so that I could prevent turning into the Hulk, because it would calm that down, because I'd be able to know I'll be okay. I can handle myself. I won't have to flip out. And so I started looking for a martial art. And I had done, the normal things like, taekwondo and boxing. And I realized that, those skills are great, but anybody bigger and stronger and faster is going to kick your ass. And I didn't want that. I wanted something special. So I started looking into things like Aikido and Wing Chun and, stuff that looked like I didn't have to get all in my muscles, but it was a skill. And then in my mind, I did the thing that I teach people to do now. I didn't realize it, but I said, okay, I went to Fantasyland and I started saying, if I could make up the perfect martial art, and I made up this total mystical martial art that didn't exist, that couldn't possibly exist, where you didn't have to use muscle and you used energy and you could do, and I went on that fantasy for a while and I went, wow. And I went, okay, so that doesn't exist, so let's go find something else. After I did that, it was probably a week or two later, I was, at that time I was running a theater company with a bunch of other people, and I was, an actor and going on auditions and doing plays and all that, and I was working multiple jobs, and so I did a temp job that a friend of mine set me up with, and at that temp job I was there, and there was this guy. He looked like he walked right out of Dances with Wolves. He was a Navajo, really long hair, just total stereotypical Navajo Native American guy. And I was talking to somebody, I don't know who it was, and I was telling them, I was asking, do you think I should go after Wing Chun or should I try Aikido? Because I'm looking for a martial art, blah, blah, blah. And he turns around, right? He says, you're looking to train martial arts? And I said, yeah. And he says, what are you looking for? And I told him. And he said, come to this class. And I went, what? He says, just come. I said, what is it? He said, just come. Just come to the class and check it out. And I went, okay. So I walked in to this class, and here were these guys, him, really tall, Native American guy, and this little tiny Japanese guy, and they're dancing. They look like they're tap dancing. And I did everything not to bust up laughing. Like, what the hell is happening here? And I sat there and I, had this Native American guy show me how to do some, postures and standing, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell is this all about. And I figured out, I'll give it 6 months. In 6 months, if nothing, it was free, which is really interesting. And he said, if I said to myself, in 6 months, if I don't learn anything, I'll walk out. What have I got to lose? And at the end of that class, I'm sure I talk about it in here. At the end of that class, that little tiny Japanese guy that I could have picked up and thrown, through a window if I wanted, started showing his skills, and he was really fast. And then he started doing demonstrations, and he just would barely touch you, and bombs would go off inside of you. And after him touching me a couple times, I realized there's nothing I can do against this guy. If this guy wants to do something to me, there's not a damn thing in the world I can do to stop him. And so that was the beginning of this. So I don't know if I talk about it or not. I think I do, but let's keep going. So I stumbled upon and was given the rare opportunity to join an invitation only. That's the other thing too. It was like invitation only. You couldn't just show up. And once you were doing it, you had to sort of keep a secret. You weren't allowed to talk about it. You could tell people you were doing something, but you couldn't tell anybody about what was going on in there. And, you could invite somebody in, but that's the only way. You had to vouch for them. That was the only way you that they could come into the class. And I found out this is what's called an inner door martial art in Chinese society. That there's outer door, which is what they teach everybody, where they do it in front of the whole world, like, you know, and then there's the inner door, which they don't teach anybody, except, you know, family, people who are part of the family or invited by family members. And that's because each village has to be able to protect itself from the other village. And so each village has to have its own secret weapons. And if you know, one of the other villagers comes by and watches it, they'll figure out what you're doing, and, you know, then they can come and kick your ass. So this was one of those inner door martial arts. Anyways, so I was later told that this was an inner door internal martial art practice of mystic warriors of the fabled Mao Shan Taoist lineage of wizards and demon fighters. I had been an avid weightlifter for years. I took pride in my muscular physique, but in this style of internal martial arts, large muscles are a detriment. That type of chi energy that this style creates in the body is best utilized when energy can freely flow through the limbs. Large, densely packed muscles tend to constrict the energy flow. So when I showed up to my first Tao martial arts class, the instructor saw me trying to desperately bring my elbows together in a futile attempt to adopt the first Qigong posture. He walked over to me and laughingly said, "Oh, sheesh, it's Lou Ferrigno trying to do Tao." Ha ha ha. Before learning any actual martial arts, all beginners were forced to learn preliminary Qigong postures as well as a footwork set. This was my first encounter with an internal martial style, and as an amateur bodybuilder, this stuff seemed completely worthless to me. For the life of me, I could not at all imagine how this silly prancing around could stop an attacker. However, I decided to give it at least 6 months before making any judgments. I decided that if after 6 months of dedicated practice, I still felt that this was a worthless form of self-defense, I would discard it and keep looking. But by the end of that first class, I was to glimpse the sheer devastating power of a real energy-based shamanic martial art. At the end of the class, it was customary for the students to gather and listen to the teacher explain Taoist concepts and demonstrate practical applications of the martial practice. The teacher began sharing stories of the old masters in the lineage and the feats they were supposedly able to accomplish, including resurrecting themselves from the dead. I assumed these were metaphorical stories designed to teach a spiritual lesson. After about 20 minutes, though, I realized that he was not being metaphorical at all. He was being very literal. I began wondering what the hell I had gotten myself into. And as I was beginning to think that I was wasting my time, the teacher was now ready to show martial applications. Still trying to keep an open mind, I watched him demonstrate some of the advanced forms. The demonstrations were very impressive. He was extremely fast. There was no denying that he was a very fast striker. But speed is worthless without power. I knew how to take a punch. So I was not totally convinced yet. Did this stuff actually work in a real street fight situation? The instructor began patting the air with his palm, like this. He said, "This is all I'm going to do." He said to me, "I'm not going to use any muscle strength. Here, grab onto my arm and feel." I did. His arm was very soft. I could not feel any muscular tension. "Am I flexing my muscles at all?" he asked. "No," I said. He indeed was not using any muscle strength whatsoever. He was slowly patting the air in an overly effeminate fashion as if to demonstrate that he was not using any strength. Then he said, "Keep holding on while I strike Bob over there." That wasn't his name. He kept patting the air and while turning his body, so he was like this, and Bob is like right here. I don't know if you, let me see if I can. So like Bob is standing right here, right? And he's patting like this, and he just turns. That's all I did. Where'd the book go? Come back here. So he was not using any strength. And he said, "Keep holding while I strike Bob over here." He kept patting the air while turning his body into his palm, landed on a student's chest. There was a loud crack as his palm came down on Bob's pectoral area. The student grunted loudly as his body reacted as though he'd been hit with a sledgehammer. I can vouch that at no time did the teacher's muscles flex. I had my hands, around his arm, so I could feel. He wasn't using or anything. He literally was just doing this. "Now, I'll show you what that feels like," he said to me. So he made the same gesture in the air a couple of times and then brought his palm down on my chest slowly enough, like he didn't wasn't like crack, he just went That's all I did. He made the same gesture in the air a couple of times and brought his palm down on my chest slowly enough that I could watch him. Just as with Bob, his palm came down on my chest with a loud crack. It felt as though a bomb had exploded inside my rib cage, but it was much more than that. It also felt as though someone had screamed at my soul. I wanted to jump through the wall. It was a terrifying feeling. The energy of the strike did not drive me back physically. It penetrated deeply into my body. My whole nervous system shut down, and I was in a state of shock. I had been in my share of fights, and yet I had never felt anything remotely like this. It was an absolutely unique experience that was not part of my definition of reality. I was completely disoriented and I was scared. Even though I was twice as big as this little Asian guy, I could have easily picked him up and tossed him. I knew that if this tiny man wanted to physically harm me, there was not a damn thing I could have done to defend myself. Having grown up with a much bigger, abusive older brother, I had a very good poker face. In my house, if you showed fear, you got beat even harder. My defense mechanisms kicked in and I showed no fear or pain. Teacher slightly looked confused and said, I'll increase the energy a little bit. He repeated the same strike, but this time the energy was considerably stronger. I was barely able to stand after that strike. Had I been a little smarter and knowing what I know now, I would have shown what I was feeling. I had gotten the point. This stuff was no joke. However, my defense mechanisms were deeply entrenched, and once again, I did not show any fear or pain. Teacher cocked his head in disbelief and said, okay, one last time. I'll increase the energy just a little more. He raised his palm in the air, and I tell you, it took everything inside of me not to run out of there screaming like a little girl. His hand came down one last time, and the energy exploded inside of me, rocking me to my core. I felt my spirit briefly jump out of my body, and I was unable to hide the very real pain of that strike. Finally, the teacher smiled and said, you see how that feels? I'm only using probably like 5% force on you. It's not normal, is it? He was right. It was not normal. With that, we ended class. The teacher invited me back the next week, even though I was totally disoriented and my understanding of the universe was shattered. I still wanted to know how he did that. I remember saying to myself, if this little guy is just a human like me. If he can do it, so can I. I was determined to learn this art. I got home that night and began practicing the very silly, ridiculous, and totally worthless feeling Qigong postures I had been taught earlier in the evening. I struggled to bring my elbows together. It's because my chest was so big I couldn't bring my elbows together. My years of bench presses and push-ups had made my pectoral muscles so tight that I literally could not get my elbows to touch. As I struggled to get the correct posture, I suddenly felt a huge surge of energy flow through my whole body. It was an incredibly blissful feeling that permeated my whole being. This scared me. My Christian upbringing had trained me to distrust any spiritual experience outside of a Christian framework. I had been taught that any spirit that did not confess Jesus was a demon from hell. Even though it had been 5 years since I left Christianity, the old thought patterns died slowly. As I was trying to stay in the moment and not allow my fear to force me to release the posture, I felt a presence on my left side. I began to see a vision of a nuclear explosion. Then I, quote, heard a voice in my left ear. I didn't really hear, it wasn't that. You get it, though. I heard a voice in my left ear say, quote, you have been chosen to learn this art, but be mindful of the power it holds. It has the potential for great destruction if misused. If you misuse this power, it will be taken away from you. Then in a flash, everything went back to normal. I collapsed to the ground, trembling with fear and excitement. I decided I had had enough for one day and proceeded to eat some food and watch TV in an attempt to regain some normalcy before going to bed. My life and understanding of reality would never be the same. At that time, 20 plus years ago, the Maoshan name was still a term that inspired fear in many native Chinese. I'll spell it for you right here. Maoshan. At that time, 20 plus years ago, the Maoshan name was still a term that inspired fear in many native Chinese. I learned this firsthand as I tried to visit the Taoist Institute of North Hollywood one afternoon. I knocked on the door to the storefront studio that was labeled Taoist Institute of North Hollywood. The priest welcomingly answered the door, and I began asking about the classes they offered. The large, muscular African-American Taoist abbot happily offered to give me a tour of the temple as he kindly and thoroughly answered my questions. I told him that I was happy to find his studio as I had just begun practicing Tao. He casually asked me what style of Tao I practiced. I had matter-of-factly told him Mao Shan. His face went pale and his eyes got very big, and he exclaimed, "That stuff is dangerous. You gain great power, but demons will jump inside your body and give you an early death." According to him, his Taoist master once saw a Mao Shan monk come out of the forest and performed some supernatural feats that scared the pants off of him. He excitedly wanted to know if I summoned demons through rituals or put pins into dolls and other such nonsense. I said, no, we just do internal martial art forms and practice martial applications that involve transmitting energy. From what I'm told, masters can use the energy to fight evil spirits. He then continued to warn me about the dangers of Mao Shan sorcery while he happily gave me a tour of his temple and dojo. After a pleasant visit, he invited me to come back and take some classes. I was gratified that I had found another avenue to explore authentic Taoist mysticism. As per the abbot's suggestion, I returned a week later to inquire about meditation classes. I knocked on the front door, excited about learning his style of meditation and Qigong. I waited. No answer. He refused to come to the door. I could clearly see him through the glass storefront window. He was in his office ignoring me. I knew he had seen me. I had arrived during posted office hours. I was confused. Maybe it was some kind of kung fu test of character or something. So I was patiently and silently waited for him outside the front door. After 5 or 10 minutes, he suddenly got up from his desk, opened the door, and stood there blocking the entrance. While towering over me and glaring down, he gruffly said, "What?" Taken aback and somewhat hurt by his sudden unfriendly behavior, I stammeringly pointed at the class schedule posted on his door and said, I just wanted to know if these were all the meditation classes you taught. "Yep," was his response as he physically blocked the entrance to his temple. Confused, I replied, okay, bye. With that, he slammed the door in my face. He was so nice to me a week earlier when I met him. What happened? I later deduced that he must have called his master in China during the intervening week after our first friendly encounter and told him about some guy claiming to be studying Mao Shan. His master probably sternly warned him to avoid me at all costs in order to avoid contamination with evil spirits. Based on my childhood Christian history and experience with exorcisms, I was a little scared by this Taoist priest's sudden change of behavior and all of his previous talk of voodoo dolls and demons. I began to wonder if my initiation experience with the spirit fighting forms had been a demonic experience. I had only been practicing the spirit fighting forms for a few months. At my next class, I asked my teacher about it. He laughed and said, quote, "Don't use the name of our sect in front of Chinese people. They've heard too many fairy tales about us." "Even Taoist priests?" I asked. "Especially other Taoists," he said, laughing even harder. "They are more scared of us than anyone else." I have since come to learn that in traditional Chinese culture, when anyone wants to be known as a fearsome black magician, they adopt the title of Mao Shan to indicate they are a sorcerer. But this type of Mao Shan is not in reference to the actual monastery of the same name, but rather to any number of lower folk magic practices associated with conjuring evil spirits to perform mundane tasks and curses. So in reality, the vast majority of storefront Mao Shan psychics and magicians in Hong Kong and China have little or nothing to do with the original Mao Shan practices. So I guess I can give that poor Taoist abbot the benefit of the doubt. While the spirit fighting arts are easily far and away the most powerful life force energy exercises I've ever practiced, the main effect of them was to grant me better health, spiritual awareness, and some extremely effective self-defense skills. I did experience powerful spiritual initiations from the spirit fighting forms which could easily frighten someone away from those practices. Thankfully, none of the Taoist abbot's dire predictions ever came true for me. In fact, quite the opposite has been the same. Ironically, even though that Taoist priest predicted that demons would jump inside my body, the art I was taught was actually designed for cleansing areas of negative disembodied entities, not summoning them. My Tao teacher told me that, quote, "Our practice was a lonely one," unquote. I did not completely understand this until after a few weeks of practice. I noticed that my home felt very, very empty. I had not realized it, but I became aware that until that time in my life, there had always been spirits in my home. I just didn't know it. Like white background noise, I had just gotten used to them. It wasn't until my home was completely empty that I understood what he meant. The spirit fighting arts have the effect of empowering the practitioner's aura with a certain vibration that drives away all entities except for very high-level master spirits. So for the first time in my life, I was completely alone in my house on all levels, physical, mental, and spiritual. It was an eerie feeling. This is one reason that learning spirit fighting can be frightening for most people. The average person unconsciously takes comfort in the company of other spirit entities. The kinds of spirit entities that contact me now are of a very different nature than before my training. Their higher vibrations can be very unsettling, but the results of such contact always results in powerful transformation on multiple levels. I had numerous personal experiences that lended credence to this art being a method of combating negative entities, but it was confirmed for me with the following incident years later. I think I know what I'm about to say here. I was at a yoga class. Everybody was warming up in their particular fashion. Mine was to practice my spirit fighting forms in a corner. One of my friends was there who had previously complained to me about a ghost in her house. After listening to her, I concluded that it was a mutual energetic contract. I didn't tell her that. That was just my thought. I concluded that it was a mutual energetic contract. It didn't sound like a big deal, so I didn't comment on it other than to acknowledge and support her experience of it. As I began to practice a Qigong set of hand mudras known as weapons, this woman who was lying down on the floor with her eyes closed suddenly bolted straight up, looked at me and shouted, "What did you just do?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm just doing my Qigong sets." To which she retorted, "Well, whatever it was, it just shot right through me." With that, she stood up straight as if she were a marionette on strings and bolted out the front door again as if being held up by her underarms. When I had finished the set, she came back inside as though nothing had happened and we all had a normal yoga class. She later told me that at that moment when she was resting with her eyes shut, she suddenly felt a power shoot right through her chest from my direction and she could not resist fleeing out the front door. I surmised that since she had participated in the energetic connection with that spirit, the spirit had the power to force her out the door along with itself. After sharing the incident with my teacher, he once again advised me to keep my practices away from the uninitiated for their own protection, and so that I would be able to have a normal social interaction with others. Otherwise, word might get around and people could start getting too scared to hang out with me. Spirit fighting arts were originally tied to other powerful Taoist animist practices, which I was later able to learn and integrate into my practice. I did not realize it at the time, but spirit fighting was to be my introduction into various animist practices that retain an unbroken lineage into prehistory. There was one other really interesting, I could give you a few different ones, but there was one other really interesting thing that happened. So at this time, for a period of, I don't know how many years. Oh, I know exactly how many years. I was celibate for 6.5 years. For 6.5 years, I studied this art and practiced it, sometimes hours a day. And I stopped really existing on this plane. If you see me now, I'm about 205 pounds. So this is me, I'm obviously lifting weights a lot now. And, I'm a middle-aged guy, so I got a little bit of a gut. So you can imagine all the weight I carry with me now. When I was deep into my practice, I was 145 pounds, thin as a rail. And I was on this very special diet, not a big deal, just a typical yogic type of diet. And I was really just not into my body all that much. And I walked around I felt like a robot. I walked around and I could see and feel everybody's energy, and I could see everybody's meridians and where they were blocked, and how to kill that person, which point to hit, and if I hit that person there, they'd die instantly. This was the kind of stuff that I was feeling, and always feeling like I was about to leave my body, which I did lots of times, just go into meditation. So I was really not on this planet very much. I'm not saying it was a blissful thing. It was an uncomfortable thing. It was uncomfortable because on the one hand, I didn't like being around people because I could feel all of their garbage, which is why when I do these Q&As and people ask questions, lots of times I'll go into exactly what it is I think that they're thinking and feeling. That's where I got that really got honed during that. If I was practicing all the time, you would never want to be around me because I would just go right into your unconscious and, pull it out. That's what the spirit fighting does. Anyway, so I was training like this, and I was at a gathering, And it was a gathering that I used to go to on a regular basis, and there was a woman there who apparently had been through a lot of stuff in her life. You know how some people aren't, they've been through a lot. They don't really know how to communicate very well. And so she kind of reminded me of like when I was a little kid, on the school ground, and the guy that maybe the bigger, older guy that likes you, instead of coming up to you and giving you a hug, he'll like punch you in the shoulder. Hey, what's up? What's up, dingus? Right? And that's, you laugh and you go, ow, but it's, that he's doing it because he likes you. So there was a woman there, and she used to, say, kind of aggressive things to me. But I knew that she just didn't know, she liked me and she didn't know how to express herself. And so one day she came in and she started doing something like that. And I heard myself. It wasn't like I tried to. I just said, why do you do that? Why do you say those kinds of things? And she started to say, well, I think it's because, and again, I saw my left hand come up and I heard myself say, don't worry, I'm safe. I won't hurt you. And I put my hand on her chest, I believe. Put my hand on her chest, like, just to touch her and let her know that I was safe. And I think it was my left hand, I'm not sure. But anyway, so she's talking and she goes, yeah, and then, or was it her, did I grab her arm? I can't remember which. But wherever I touched her someplace safe. And then she says, yeah, I think it was because my dad, and she goes, oh my God, I'm going to cry. And she fell to the floor and started sobbing uncontrollably for like 3 seconds and then immediately stopped. And she got up and she said, what did you just do to me? I said, I have no idea. What happened? And she said, you touched me and I felt this power come into my body. I guess I was touching her arm. I felt this power come into my body. And then when it got to my heart, I just couldn't help myself and I had to cry. And I fell to the ground and then all of a sudden it was gone. And from then on, she used to call me the Buddha. I'd walk in the room and she'd go, that's that guy, that's that Buddha guy. And it was hard, I was just a normal guy. That this is the kind of stuff, and this is why when people on the channel start wanting to get off on their spiritual abilities, I say, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you've accomplished anything. It's just like, go to the gym and lift weights, you get big muscles. You do energy work, you get a lot of energy. It doesn't mean that you've achieved anything. My teachers were easily the most powerful, energetic people I've ever seen, ever. And every single one of them, and I worked with 2 of them, they were totally immature. They were bullies and they were immature and they were just total nutbags. Their energies didn't save them from being idiots. And I realized that is not where enlightenment comes from. All right. So going back into the book here, let's go back here. All right. So that was my experience with the Taoist animism. So the next chapter, African shamanic drumming. Soon after my introduction to Taoist practices, I was invited to a friend's birthday party where there was going to be a drum circle. I was not thrilled with the idea of having to sit through a new AG drum circle, but I did not want to be rude to my friend and I participated anyway. When I reluctantly and self-consciously began playing the drum given to me, all of a sudden I felt something very ancient from deep within me, it was in my heart center, take over my body. I was a little frightened, but the feeling was incredibly satisfying. I felt as though this was something from many lifetimes ago coming through. It felt as though I had been a drum master in a previous life and I was reawakening this power within me. Afterwards, I resolved to find an authentic master with whom to study African drumming. Just for the record, if you had said to me 10 minutes prior to that drum circle that I would one day be one of the few people to learn and teach an esoteric animist style of drumming from a sect of the polytheist Ifa tradition of the Yoruba tribe of West Africa, I would have said, I have nothing against it, but it's really not my thing. When I asked the drum circle facilitator if he knew of any African drum masters who taught classes, he directed me to see a man named Baba Ayodele Adayemi, who I will put his name down here for you. If you're ever in Los Angeles, go check him out while he's still able to teach. He's getting pretty old. Go check him out. At his studio called Yoruba House in West Los Angeles. Yoruba House is no longer there, but Baba still teaches. That website is defunct also. A few days later, I walked in the front door of Yoruba House, and as soon as I entered, a gentle breeze wafted through the back, gingerly lifting up a small flyer containing a class schedule. The flyer gently floated across the room. This is absolutely true. I swear this happened. I was coming in from the back, and he was, near the front, and the door was open from the street, and there was a pile of flyers with the drum class schedule on it. And I walked in the back, and the breeze came in and literally picked the thing up, and it floated all the way across the room and landed right in my hand as I walked in. And I went, huh. And he goes, so a few days later, I walked in the front door of Yoruba House, and as soon as I entered, a gentle breeze wafted through from the back, gingerly lifting up a small flyer containing a class schedule. Flyer gently floated across the room and settled in my hand. Literally, like it flew like here, and then it went. Flyer gently floated across the room and settled in my hand as that soft breeze whirled around me and then disappeared. I stood there bewildered in the doorway with my mouth wide open. Master Ayo, who was coincidentally sitting in the far corner, very matter-of-factly acknowledged, "Yes, so the drums are calling to you, my brother." 20 years later, Baba Ayo is still a good friend and a mentor. He would later introduce me to another Yoruba drum master named Master Francis Awe. I'll give you his name. If you're ever in Los Angeles, go watch him and his dance troupe. Real stuff right there, Master Francis Awe. Who taught me some other very ancient, sacred talking drum rhythms of the Yoruba people. Often during my weekly drum classes that I currently teach, at the time of that book, students will begin curiously looking around the room or behind them as they play. It is not uncommon for newer students to ask, "Did you guys hear someone singing?" To which another student will reply, "You heard that too? I thought it was just me." Someone else will interject, "No, I heard children laughing." Another will respond, "Yeah, and someone was playing bells right behind me." The older students smile just knowingly. The ancestor spirits are regular visitors to our classes, and while the visiting spirits are always an exciting experience, we have grown more accustomed to their participation in class. These kinds of things, while unusual for us Westerners, are the norm in the traditional cultures that retain a connection to their prehistoric animist traditions. So this is important to know, because these ancient traditions that go back pre-Christian, this is why I keep using the phrase in my books that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. Before that has a connection that goes back before Kali Yuga. So if you don't know what Kali Yuga is, it was literally Christianity. When the age of Pisces, which we are in the tail end of, which we're coming out of. But the beginning of the age of Pisces was Kali Yuga, and it was the Middle Ages, the Catholic Middle Ages and the Crusades and all of that. That was the middle of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. That age tore us away from our pre-Christian heritage. That's why I don't follow Western magic. I don't, follow Wicca. I could find something wrong with them and I could find good things about them, but the reason why I don't is because I can feel they're not connected. They're a break. They're people trying their best to figure stuff out. But in my experience, it's really not all that powerful in comparison to this stuff. And this is why you got to follow the rules. This is why when you deal with a real shaman, the average Westerner who comes on here and wants to, bitch and complain about me charging money, or they want to say this, or you've seen the guys that come on here and you don't know what you're talking about and blah, 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 and they're smoking weed and taking drugs and they did this and, and people are stuck in their head. There's a reason why, Westerners don't understand spiritual discipline. This is why the basic Westerner, when they walk into, if they were to walk into, a real family-style lineage, martial arts class in China, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, go stand in the corner on one foot." For how long? Until I tell you to stop. I'm going to leave. And he goes and leaves for 2 hours, and you're there standing, in whatever funky position. You're sweating. If you put your foot down for 1 second, he comes back in and he knows. And he says, "Thank you, please leave." People don't understand that there really is another level of existence. And if you want to be able to access that level of existence, you've got to follow recipes, mathematical equations. The Yoruba drumming is not just people sitting around and playing whatever the hell they feel like playing. My teacher said that when the drummers are together and playing, if one drummer hits a wrong note, he's cursed the whole village, because that exact sequence of rhythms played together, if it's not done right, the doors don't open and the orishas don't come down. If you don't go through those processes of standing in the corner on one foot or whatever the hell it is, then you don't open up the meridians, and then you try and do the postures and they don't work. I have not been trained in traditional Tai Chi, which is another internal martial art. There's a whole story behind that. But because of the practice that I have done, and I have learned how to do that, I can automatically go to a Tai Chi class and know within 10 seconds whether or not the teacher knows what they're doing. And I can feel in my body if they're doing it wrong. And one of my students who came to me, he found me, I don't know how he found me, but he was a guy who had trained in a bunch of different internal martial arts, and he knew something was missing, and he came to check me out. And so I was asking him about all these other things, and I was talking about how easy it was for me to do one of these, your basic Tai Chi things, and that I know how to apply that martially better than these supposed Tai Chi masters. And he says, "Mike, you don't realize you learned how to do things these guys spend years trying to figure out, which is how to move your knee and your hip at the same time, how to move your elbow and knee and hip at the same time." He says, "You do that naturally because of the discipline you learned in your art." People don't understand this in the West. They don't. And that's why I don't have any empathy, and I have very little patience for, the peanut gallery. When they come on here and they think they know what the hell they're talking about. And I can tell. Sometimes in the first 3 or 4 words, I can see it. So if you ever get a chance to learn from a real master, and you're willing to put the effort in, then do it. I am not kidding you when I say if you do the Hool breath for 1 hour a day for the rest of your life, that things will happen, because it's a discipline. If you just focus on that one discipline. I teach a lot of stuff because people want to learn a lot of stuff and they get bored. So I teach them a lot of stuff. I'll tell you another story. This is another story I heard about, same kind of thing, traditional Chinese martial arts guy. And he's teaching, and martial arts teachers have to pay the bills. So that's why there's an inner door class and an outer door class. The outer door class is filled with a lot of people, and the inner door class is the people of, family members or really high level students that are trusted. But they need to take in, they have to take in a bunch of students or they can't pay the bills, right? So this one Chinese guy, I think it was a Western guy, he was training with him. And he was constantly saying, "I want to go to the next level. I'm ready for the next level." And he says, "Teach me a secret advanced set." So the teacher says, "Okay, I will." And if you've ever seen martial arts, Chinese martial arts, there's usually some kind of an opening. It's a salute. Now there might be a really fancy salute, big fancy salute, something like that. And that will be the salute of that school, of that lineage. So what he did was he taught this guy 5 or 6 different salutes all strung together. And he said, practice this. And then they went to some martial arts exhibition. And this guy went up and he did all of his salutes, together as the set. And there was another visiting master sitting next to him, and he says, what the hell is that? And he tells him the story. He says, oh, that's all the salutes. That guy wanted to learn, the most advanced set there was, so I taught him this. Teachers will do that. They will do that to Westerners. That's why, I giggle when people get so bent out of shape about whatever their particular yoga style is. Oh, I do Iyengar. Oh, I do hot yoga. Oh, I do... It's all Hatha yoga. All of it. And Hatha yoga is meant to be the gateway to the inner door Kundalini meditations. You have to do Hatha yoga to balance the left and the right side of the brain, to open up, all the stuff, so that when you actually do the meditations and the mantras, your body can handle it. You guys don't get this. You're not going to get this by watching YouTube. You have to go and learn from somebody. You have to sit at the foot of somebody and learn. All right, enough of that. I'll get off my high horse now. All right, next chapter, and then after this I'll take some questions. Syncretic shamanism. As a result of the high vibrational energy of my spirit fighting practices combined with the shamanic drumming, I was forced to seek out meditative practices in order to better absorb the spirit fighting energies that and help me stay grounded. Now let me explain why I had to do that. The Qigong that I teach and the meditations I teach, you'll notice I tell you have to ground. So at the very least, you have to put your hands right over left if you're a man, and if you want a female, it can be left over right, but everybody's good with right over left. And you place it on your navel and you breathe. Just breathe long and deep and feel the warmth of your hands on your navel. Do that for 3 or 5 minutes or till you feel relaxed and you're ready to get up. I had to learn that because I was learning this incredibly high-level Taoist spirit fighting martial arts. The guy that I learned from another guy who actually had achieved mastery. He did all kinds of things to achieve mastery, but there was one thing he didn't do. He didn't learn the meditations because he was a nutbag. And even though the Grand Master would try and teach him the stuff, he would say, no, I don't need that. Because all he was interested in was being a killer. And to my knowledge, he wasn't, but he wanted to be the most deadly man on the planet, and I think he probably was one of the 5 most deadly people that have walked the planet in modern times. And he wouldn't meditate, and he was bonkers. And that's because there's a thing called chi sickness. All those of you who try to open up your third eye without grounding yourself and opening up your root chakra, you're asking to get sick. You're asking to have kundalini sickness or chi sickness. You're asking to go crazy. That's what happens when you drop acid. It's what happens when you take mushrooms, when you take power plants. You're basically having chi sickness. You're going bonkers. You guys think you're having a fucking spiritual experience and you're blasting your third eye and your aura wide open. You don't have the first fucking clue what you're doing. And you end up stupider than when you started out. Knock that shit off. You can do whatever the hell you want, but you want the real thing? Do you want the real thing, or do you want to keep fucking around? Ask yourself that question. If you don't want to have any discipline and you want to keep fucking around, go ahead and keep, doing that shit. And then talk to me in 20 years. You want to be able to be healthy and happy and strong. You want to look 10, 15 years younger. Do what I'm telling you to do. Do the whole breath every day for an hour. You don't want to pay me any money? Fine. You don't want to buy the lockdown package or anything else? Fine. Do the whole breath every day for an hour. Do that for 10 years. Then come talk to me. All right. what was I saying here? All right, so as a result of the high vibrational energy of my spirit fighting practices combined with the shamanic drumming, let me finish the story. So, what ended up happening is that the universe did me a favor. It was never my idea to leave my teacher. I don't do that. If I take somebody on as a teacher and they're teaching me something, I'm the good student. I'm going to stay. I'll stay till the end. I'll stay, till death. I believe in that. My teacher was a nutbag, and I knew it. And there were things I wanted to learn, and I knew he couldn't teach me. And long story short, he ended up kicking me out. And I was very devastated by the whole thing. I'm sure I talk about it in here, but I was devastated because I was waiting to get the invitation to go meet the Grand Master, from whom I could learn the meditations. I knew he did the meditations, and I had to learn from him. The only way is that I had to be invited. And the only way I could be invited is if my teacher or his teacher went to him and said, will you see, so-and-so. Otherwise, you can't do that. You can't go behind anybody's back. So I ended up thankfully getting kicked out. And then the door was open and I was able to go around to other people, and I ended up learning stuff that they didn't know. And among them was the meditations. And that's what opened the whole thing up to help me to understand what the full tradition was. That's why I focus so much on grounding and meditation. That's what's the most important part. So don't skimp on that. All right. So I was forced to seek out meditative practices in order to better absorb the spirit-finding energies and help me stay grounded. It was through this search that I was introduced to my Kundalini yoga teacher, Dr. Julian Neal, whom I'm going to have on this channel soon. He has agreed to let me interview him. So if you have any questions, you can ask me and I will ask him. All right, so where was I? It was through this search that I was introduced to my Kundalini yoga teacher, Dr. Julian Neal, aka Gurudev Singh Khalsa. There's a bunch of Gurudev Singh Khalsas, by the way, so if you think you know who I'm talking about, you may not. Besides being a yoga master who trained directly under Master Yogi Bhajan, he's also a naturopath, psychologist. Dr. Neal was extremely helpful in guiding me through the psychic reconstruction resulting from the intense animist initiation processes inherent in these disciplines. I really did. I really needed help. You think it's easy. You guys think you're going to have this shamanic experience and you have no idea what it's like to lose your mind and really gain power. It's really, for me, this was not the easiest thing in the world. I needed help. I needed help staying in my body. The spiritual restructuring of just one of those disciplines would have been a challenge, but looking back on it now, I was going through 3 different animist initiations. It is quite possible that without his help, my modern Western psyche may not have survived the onslaught of infinity I was experiencing. We modern Westerners are just not taught in our modern culture how to accept and integrate these kinds of spiritual initiation experiences. At that time in my life, being called to a life of a wizard was not at all convenient. I was seeking to establish a career as an actor. After graduating college with a BA in theater arts, I had co-founded the Open Fist Theater Company. I had no idea that word open fist was a gay sex term in Hollywood. We got a lot of funny looks from that. But it was called, you can look for it. I think it's still around. I don't think it has a theater, but it's still around. They don't know me, even though I founded the fucking thing. They don't know who I am. The Open Fist Theater Company in Hollywood, California. I was teaching acting classes at the theater, participating in the management of the theater company, also acting in live main stage productions, as well as writing, sweeping floors. I was simultaneously doing the Hollywood audition thing, landing bit parts here and there in TV and films while working whatever part-time jobs I could find in order to eat and pay rent. And while I was still practicing my shamanic hobbies on the side, this frenetic pace landed me in the hospital, and I was forced to seriously consider my health and my sanity. I ended up getting I ended up getting a giant kidney stone that they had to operate on. I was only drinking coffee and water. No, I was only drinking coffee and Hansen's soda. That was the only things I was drinking. So I ended up getting a big giant kidney stone. It was a hectic, exhausting lifestyle, and I vacillated between wishing I could just find a monastery and practice my spiritual calling, while simultaneously wishing that I didn't have to be a shaman at all. I just wanted to live life like every other normal person. But every time I would take a break from my animist pursuits, I would begin to suffer from crushing emotional difficulties and physical illnesses. My animist practices were the only cure for these ailments. But the deeper I journeyed into the world of spirit, the more difficult it was for me to feel part of this modern world. I felt torn between two universes and didn't feel that I belonged to either one. Being a person of European descent living in a modern Western culture is very challenging for someone who is called to be a shaman. Mystical work by its own nature can make it very difficult for someone to function in any society, much less in a modern Western society that does not recognize or honor such pursuits. In times past, even in Europe, the wizard was someone to honor and respect. Now we are welcomed with scoffing derision by many. At the time of the writing of this book, I am almost 50 years old, and thankfully I have finally begun to comfortably settle into my calling as a shaman and a teacher. Part of the reason for that has been that I have stopped fighting my calling and just accepted that this is what I am. However, the spiritual initiations have not ceased. After finally submitting to my spiritual calling, I actively began seeking instruction in the higher level mystical Taoist teachings of my sect. But as soon as I started to actively seek this training, I kept running into roadblocks at every turn. I began receiving teachings in meditation, and I started practicing these new techniques, whole breath, and teaching them to my students after thoroughly testing them out. But since these teachings were not coming from any recognized external source, I doubted them. I told my students these new teachings were Taoist in origin. I wasn't lying. I assumed that whatever ancestral masters were teaching these techniques to me were probably ascended Taoist masters, since it was in that tradition where I learned the most powerful energy practices in my repertoire. One meditation I learned in trance at this time was centered around a breath and sound of hul. I have shared my experience discovering this sacred sound in my first book, and I have outlined the technique on my YouTube channel, and I give the YouTube link there. Well, why don't I just write it and I'll copy and paste it. Is that it? I think it's the whole thing. Let's just assume it's the whole thing. There you go. Have fun. In researching this mantra, I was able to find this exact sound of hul. I was not able to find this exact sound of hul in any Eastern tradition. I found hu in Taoist and Sikh traditions, but not hul. By the way, the Ekankar guys, that cult, that guy stole that. It's actually not Ekankar, it's Ek Onkar. He took it from a Sikh mantra. Ek Onkar Satnam Siri Wahe Guru. It means out of one creator. Ek Onkar, out of one creator. It's not Ekankar. Those guys took the who sound, and being typical stupid Westerners, they go hue. Hue. Guys stole that from the Sikhs. In any case, I found hu in Taoist and Sikh traditions, but not hul. After 2 years of sporadically searching for the origins of this sound, I finally asked my spiritual guides in meditation from where this sound originated. I was told that I was looking in the wrong place. I remember that. I remember meditating and going, where was this from? And I get this feeling, you're looking in the wrong place. I woke up. What? Long story short, I would later find out that this sound of hul was the sacred mantric root for the ancient prehistoric Germanic mother goddess known as Holle or Hulda, and thus began my journey in Teutonic animism. Around this same time, I was becoming increasingly frustrated with the continuous roadblocks I was encountering in furthering my Taoist training. Coincidentally, out of nowhere and for no logical reason, both of my Taoist teachers suddenly abandoned me and officially ejected me from their sect. There is a logical reason, I just don't want to get into it. They cut off all communication with me. While I have my suspicions as to the reasons, which I suspect are political in nature, I still do not know, nor have I been told what the official reason was for my ejection. As a result, any avenues for further advanced training in that sect was permanently closed to me. As my yoga teacher used to say, quote, rejection is the universe's protection. Actually, rejection is God's protection, but I didn't like that word when I wrote this. This turned out to be very true. Had they not ejected me from their sect, I would not have been provoked to investigate my own ethnic ancestral spirituality. I was deeply hurt by this sudden and seemingly unprovoked ejection, and I discontinued my spirit fighting practices for a time because every time I practiced, I saw their faces and deep hurt feelings would overwhelm me. Incidentally, after beginning my investigation into my ancestral spiritual traditions, I was given opportunities to learn some higher level teachings of my Taoist sect from other people in the lineage who had trained directly under the Grand Master. Because my immediate teachers had ejected me, I was now free to learn from others without being disrespectful to my teachers. So a big karmic thing. It probably was a big karmic test, and I passed it. One of my previous students is now training directly under the Grand Master, who I understand has passed away. So as it happens, I have been able to study and practice advanced forms and techniques that my original teachers had not even learned or even knew existed. Even though I was not at their level of power, I had still learned pretty much everything that they could teach me. So their rejection was actually the best thing for me. Okay, so that's the end of that chapter. I'll be happy to take any questions now, if there are any. All right. Renee, Battlewoman of the Woods, question. Have you thought about a more structured teaching for Qigong and martial arts? You know so much. Do you plan on making more martial arts videos? No, not yet. I mean, I think about it, but at some point you just kind of have to train with somebody in person. I've thought a lot about making videos of the sets that I know, but technically I don't have permission to do that. The Grand Master has passed away. My teacher's teacher, I believe, is still alive. I believe that my ex-teacher is still alive. And thinking about that, I don't know that I don't think it's proper for me to teach them. Now, if I did think it was proper for me to teach them, would I do it? The answer is probably not, because without a teacher to fix your posture and little things and transmit energy, because even just standing in the room while somebody's doing it, there's an energy transfer. Because you're not just training with your teacher, you're training with other, the other ascended masters of that lineage. You'll be training and you'll feel your body sort of slightly shift a little bit. Sometimes it's your body doing it, and who knows? So if you're with a real master, that knows how to do that, they can just sit there, and with their eyes, they can adjust your body. This kind of stuff. You can't do this through video. So that's why I don't. Everything that can be taught through video, I have taught. And that's why the Celestial Qigong is so important. People wanted another one, so I made a level 2. People want another one, maybe I'll make a level 3. But, really, if you master the first level, it's so Western. People just get so, the traditional guy, you go, he says, he gives you one thing and says, come back in 10 years. It's really important to master the basics. And Westerners, especially people who want to learn online, are too, they're too impatient. So to answer your question, I haven't made any firm decisions at the moment. I don't know yet. Master what I've given you. Even the free stuff. The free stuff on my channel. Master it. I'm telling you, spend your whole life doing the whole breath, you won't need anything else. Do the heaven earth qigong meditation. If somebody were to say, give me one advanced, one practice for the rest of my life, I would say do the heaven earth qigong meditation. Do that for an hour a day, every day. That'll do everything for you. All right. Matt Covington, question, do we reincarnate into family lines? So what I appreciate is when people ask questions about what I'm teaching, what I'm talking about. So if, when people come up and they, I don't know you, Matt, this isn't personal, I don't know if you're new to the channel, probably not. It's just kind of like, it gives me the impression that you're just sort of got nothing better to do and I'll go on here and let me just throw out a question. This is why when you sit at the teacher's foot, you wait until he says, do you have a question? You sit and you listen. I'll tell a story that my yoga teacher taught when he was at the ashram. And there was, somebody had made this thing called space paste, which I guess is you can use with, what is it, some kind of nutmeg or something like that. I guess it's a hallucinogen. And I guess somebody had made it there, and he ended up eating some or drinking some or something, and he didn't realize it. Or maybe he did. I don't know if he did or not. Anyway, and he ended up sitting down to teach, and he was, he was tripping out, and he's just sitting there, and then he realized that 20 minutes had gone by, but the students were just sitting there and had not moved. And he shared the thing to express that sometimes just sitting at the foot of the teacher and not saying anything, that's where the learning comes. So when people come in and they drop these kind of questions, I get it, you're on YouTube. But it makes me think, I'm here doing this whole thing. Listen to what I'm saying. Don't just come in and barf out a question. That's a pretty simple question. It's a yes or no question. The answer to your question is yes and no. There you go. I wasn't talking about that in this one. So again, I'm not trying to tell you guys what to do. It's YouTube. I'm in teacher mode. I've been thinking about all this really deep stuff. You want the deep stuff. This is the kind of stuff you got to do. I would have to go and, when my Taoist teacher was teaching, and he would sit there, after we'd been training for an hour and we're all sweaty and want to sit down and, drink or soda or something. And you'd just have to sit there and stand there, and he would talk sometimes for an hour about who knows what. You just had to sit there and listen. You didn't even leave to go to the bathroom. And that's important, not because it's about you being the student and the teacher. It's a meditative state of being open to, first off, listening to your discomfort. Very beginning of doing something you don't want to do for a long period of time is you have to listen to your discomfort and your impulses. And you have to learn not to react to all of your selfish, narcissistic impulses. Learning and just sitting there and listening. That there's a transfer that's going on if you get into that state. Okay? Anyway, nothing personal, Matt Covington. I don't mean anything against that. You just caught me on one of those days. Ganunga Greg. Please go to this website, greg.thunderwizard.com. He's one of my, there it is. He's one of my apprentices, and he has taken what I have taught, which you can learn in the lockdown package, the astrology certification. And he has created his own 12 house readings and 9 world rune readings. And he's gone beyond. He's doing stuff that, even he tells me about it, and I didn't teach him how to do that. This is somebody who's really, taken what I've taught him and gone beyond it. So go check him out if you want a reading from him. Okay. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All, question. When it comes to techniques that have been lost, should we take it upon ourselves to ask the ancestors to reveal it to us and then channel them? Yes, that's how you do it. In one of my books, I talk about the same scenario. It's probably the next chapter, where I was really upset because I was no longer able to, now the lines of communication were broken and I was never going to get to learn all the fancy other stuff I wanted to learn. And so out of frustration, I said to the universe, if there are any ascended masters of my own ethnic tradition that want to teach me, I'm open to hearing from you. And then the Hool breath and other things. So yeah. But first, before you start trying to master the lost techniques, master something that you have. Something that I've given. Seriously. If you want to be able to get to that place so that the ancestors, because they're looking. The ancestors are looking all over the world for those that have been karmically marked to train something, right? To learn in something. And so by throwing out there, I'm open to learning from you. Please teach me. They put you on their radar. But by doing and mastering a practice, you are a neon sign that says, I want to learn. But they're going to wait until you master that practice first. Because if you don't, you won't know what to do with what they give you. Truth is, they're giving it to us all the time. We just don't know what to do with it. We can't hear it. So yes, but master something. Master something that I've given you if you want to work with my lineage. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of all question. Is it worth the effort to try and channel the ancient lost techniques? I just answered that. Or should we work with what we have and just be open to inspiration from the masters? Yes to both questions. Alex Tremo, is that a question? Question, what? No, sorry. Where did I go? Alex Tremo del Norte, is that a question? No, it's not a question. I have a question. So do me a favor, write in all caps like you see other people doing. Write the word question, because otherwise, like that, I skim through the comments just to get to the questions. Because if you don't write that, I may miss your question. I do it all the time. So make sure you write just the word question in all caps. The whole thing doesn't have to be in all caps. I have a question. What are your thoughts on the current BLM protest riots? Are they justified? Again, I just got through saying that, don't distract me with a monkey wrench. Okay, I'm going to put my ego aside and I'm going to talk to you directly. You're at the foot of a master right now. Don't fuck it up with whatever garbage is flying around in your head. Ask me a question about what I'm teaching. That doesn't help you. I don't have any thoughts on it. I put one video on there. Don't ask me about that. Don't ask me shit like that that's going to potentially put me in a position of upsetting somebody or pissing somebody off or showing off my ego or, don't ask me those kinds of questions. Ask me a question about what I'm teaching. Without having an opinion on that, which of course I do, that will come and go. What I'm talking to you about is stuff that is going to be here after the riots calm down and or, get worse or something changes or something doesn't change. Okay? Nothing personal. You guys caught me at a deep, reading some deep stuff, so you're getting the deep version of me here. Any more questions? Stormageddon, Dark Lord of all. Question, is it necessary to practice Kundalini Yoga along with the shamanic practices of this path? No, it is not. Or do the energy practices of the Thunder Path fulfill the role of Kundalini Yoga? I'm not saying that they do. They're two different paths. I can do both because I know how to. I don't recommend that you do that. I don't recommend, if you work with a lineage, and this is a lineage, when you work with a lineage, you want to stick with the vibration of that lineage. The ascended masters have their own thoughts and feelings, and they get upset if you start mixing your energy with another lineage energy. They get upset, and the reason why they get upset is because each vibration of each lineage is designed to do a certain thing within your body. So you kind of have to be called. And if you feel a calling to a lineage, stick with it. And if you mix it with another lineage without knowing what you're doing, the energies, the different vibration as the energies can cause a sine wave, which can start, destroying you, which is what happened to me, because I didn't know what I was doing. Now I can, and I know what to do and what not to do, but I don't recommend that people do that. Beatrice Gruss, I can't tell if your question is serious or not, but it's coming across. Number one, why would you ask me that question? What the hell does that have to do with anything? It's coming across to me as disrespectful, and since I'm in this mode, I'm talking, I feel like I'm talking from an ascended master's working through me. That kind of disrespect, you don't get to stay here anymore. So I'm going to block you from the channel. You can watch it, but you don't get to ask any more questions. Okay, it's not. I don't want to disrespect the ancestors. So by disrespecting me right now, you're disrespecting them. So goodbye. I'm not even going to mention that guy's name. He says, question: what do I practice if I have a real negative being or mind parasite? Been in my mind for years, causing pain. You need help. Go see a therapist. I'm not saying that you don't. You need a therapist, though. The reason why I'm saying that is because if you have a mind parasite, as you say, it's because you unconsciously opened the door. You unconsciously opened the door because whatever that mind parasite is doing to you is distracting you from what your real pain is, which is your own unconscious, unresolved emotional issues. I know this because I was an exorcist for years, and I stopped doing exorcisms for this reason. So you did it to yourself. You're not aware of how you did it. It was done on an unconscious level, but there's some unresolved childhood crap in there that is so painful that you need somebody to come and cause drama in your life so you'll be distracted. So you need to go see a therapist. And then if you want, go see a shaman of whatever choosing and have it removed. And if you go and deal with your issues, it'll leave by itself, but you probably won't be able to do it alone. So you need a therapist. Kevin Clegg, question: for energy work like Hool breath and other chi work, what types of foods and diets should I focus and be aware of? Just go after your basic clean, yogic diet. Eat a lot of live green foods, organic stuff. Things like reishi mushroom and ginseng, especially American ginseng. American ginseng is really good for high-level chi stuff. And I'm not a vegan, so if you're going to eat animal products, stay away from things like milk, bread, cheese, red meat, and stick to things like chicken and fish. Organic, of course. Basic stuff. Stay away from processed foods. Eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and green stuff and all of that. All right, let's see what else. Ricky Green, question: aside from your teachings, do you recommend for those of us born in the West but called to shamanism to study Taoist teachings? I don't recommend anybody do anything. I can vouch that if you can find a real Taoist teacher, it's the most powerful life force energy stuff you will find in the world. I believe what the Hopis say, that there are 4 basic tribes in the world, which originally, there was one tribe, and the Great Spirit, whatever that means to you, said to them, I'm going to send you off in 4 different directions to learn and master 4 of the elements. And so the 4 races are the 4 elements. And the element that the people who ended up being the East Asians were sent to master was the element of air, which is really ether. They went to master energy. The Europeans went to master fire, which is technology. The Native Americans went to master earth, which is shamanism. And the Africans mastered water, which is music. That's why when you turn on the radio anywhere in the world, I don't care if you're listening to Cheap Trick or, you know, whatever it is you're listening to, it was Yoruba music. The only thing is maybe country music and classical music. Other than that, everything that you listen to is African based. And that's because, like water goes everywhere. So where, you know, that you know, the music of Africa has filtered into the whole world now, and you know, like I said, whether you're listening to rock and roll or blues or whatever, you're listening to African music. That's water. Let's see here. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All. Question: is core shamanism something that is compatible with this path? By core shamanism, you mean with a drum and, you know, drumming and traveling to the three worlds? Yes. Nope, shamanic drumming is fine. All right, that's it for the questions. All right, so if you don't have any questions, I gotta do some business here. Lockdown.thunderwizard.com. $3,214 worth of savings to you. That means that you get all of my teachings, including all of the Qigong that I teach, except for the free stuff on the channel, including my certifications for astrology, rune readings, and if you choose to, you know, when you do the what is your perfect career, you can learn how to become a life coach. Just take that, you know, it's not a certification, but take that, you follow that exact recipe that I teach you. You can do what I do and be a, quote, life coach, help people find their soul desire and their highest career and to make money. Thunderwizard.com is my subscription site. Please go there and support the channel. When you subscribe, you get access to private videos that only subscribers get to, and I go into detail talking about things that I don't necessarily talk about on this channel. The different levels will give you access to more and more videos. At the higher levels, you can work with me on a personal one-on-one basis if there's any openings. So that keeps this channel afloat. That's what pays my bills and keeps the channel afloat. So if you appreciate this channel, subscribe. If you don't like it, you can unsubscribe, you know, whenever you want. Courses.thunderwizard.com has all of my books and other things that you can't get here on the lockdown package. Of course, subscribe and hit the bell button. I have a new channel. Trying to remember the name of it. Surviving BPD relationship breakup or something like that. Anyway, a while back, not too long ago, a few months ago, I got into a relationship with a woman who turned out had severe borderline personality disorder, and it was extremely toxic and horrific for me. And so I created a channel for myself, and that's starting to take off. In fact, it's doing much better than this channel, which is frustrating because I work really hard on this channel and it gets almost no views, and it really is frustrating. So that's the best way to support this channel, as I said, in those ways up there. So that's I've done all of my business. Let's see if there's any questions. No more questions. All right, that's it for me then. So this was part one, and then later at some point later on, I will do part two, and maybe a part three. I don't know. We'll get through the whole book if we can. All right, that's it for me, guys. Hope you're doing well, and I will talk to you later.